Hello everyone. We're having a look at theme 2, writing and city life, which is basically the Mesopotamian civilization. In the last lesson, we had a look at the temple town of Uruk. So such things are important for you to remember, such names. So for example, you're asked that name a temple town. So you would then say, your answer would be Uruk. Kindly try and remember names of a few gods and goddesses. Inanna is important. She was the goddess of love and war. We saw how we have also found evidences of a defensive wall and depiction of armed horses and victims, and that's what tells us that war was probably happening. Not probably, it was happening. That's so most of the times whatever things are depicted as paintings or sculptures, especially scenes that are made, we can be sure that such things were happening at that time or were present at that time, and that is why people have made them. Not even for Mesopotamia, even if you go way back to what we had to look at in the first chapter, early man, early humans, their cave paintings, well, when they drew certain animals, they probably saw them, and that is why they were drawing them. We'll just have a look at a few pictures. Gods of Mesopotamia. On the right hand side, you can see a figure, a large figure, and then there is a smaller figure beneath it trying to hit it with a spear. And on the left hand side, you can see how in the middle there is a moon, and then there are huts made as you go down lower. This was probably the depiction of the moon god. This is a ziggurat. A ziggurat was a temple basically. This is a ziggurat of Mesopotamia. Have a look at this stone slab on the right side. In between, you see a figure seated on a throne. That could probably have been a god. Some more gods. I've just named one for you, which is the moon god of war, and Inanna, the goddess of love and war. There were more gods: Enki, Enlil. These are the sculptures that have been found, and we believe that they were portraying the various gods. The earliest known temple of the south was of circa 5000 BC. I've already told you what this C means. C means circa. Circa means approximately around this date. It's a very small structure. There is the entrance, and then there is the altar. The altar is where the idol was placed. Offerings were made. This is the temple of a later period of circa 3000 BCE with an open courtyard. A much larger structure. Look closely, you'll be able to identify the walls. The area surrounding it seems higher. You can also see little arches for doorways. This is the evidence we found of a cylinder seal of circa 3200 BCE. See what it explains. The bearded and armed standing figure. So this figure you see, have a look at the figure on the extreme right hand side. He's standing, he's bearded, he's also holding a spear pointed towards the ground. This person is probably believed to be victorious by the way he is dressed and also by the way he is standing. He has weapons, he is standing tall, he doesn't look injured, he looks free in fact. Then compare this tall standing figure with the other figures as you have a look at the left portion of the painting from the figure. You see that one figure is on the ground, hands are tied behind the back, another figure is standing, looks like it's almost begging. There's another figure in a fetus sort of a position, but again hands tied at the back. A fourth figure you see also seated with hands tied at the back, and a fifth figure below it almost in a kneel down position with hands at the back. Two figures you see standing, they're probably holding sticks. So these could just be soldiers because they are not so impressively dressed as this first standing figure. So to believe that this standing figure is probably, the one on the extreme right is probably the hero. Now a very important word here is mentioned, steles. Steles are stone slabs with inscriptions or carvings. So a similar sort of a hero has been depicted in other steles, which are stone slabs with inscriptions or carvings, and thus we draw parallels. That's in this sort of a looking hero or figure has been presented in other steles. The impression of the cylinder seal is also depicting him. Life in the city. Here we'll have a look at a city called Ur. So a very important temple town. A very important temple town was Uruk. Here we're just having a look at another city called Ur. There was a ruling elite, which is a small section of people who had enormous wealth. Evidences of riches buried with kings and queens of Ur have been found. It's believed that the ordinary people lived in nuclear families, which is... what is a nuclear family? A nuclear family is only where there is the husband, his wife, and their children. The father, which is a male, was the head of the household, and if the male is the head of the household, it means there is patriarchy. Just the opposite is if a female or the mother is the head of the household, it's matriarchy. For marriage, gifts were given from the groom's, sorry about this typo, family, not gamily, family to the bride's family, which is a bride known as bride price, which is the opposite of dowry. So I'll just explain this concept to you. What happens in dowry? In dowry, the girl's family gifts things to the boy's family. Alright, I'm using a very not softly, but a word which doesn't sound very harmful. Gift. A gift doesn't sound like a dangerous word, but you need to know that giving and asking for dowry both are illegal today. However, they've been in practice since a very, very long time, and they have also resulted in the exploitation of vulnerable people. Anyway, at a time when dowry was happening, when the bride's family gave gifts to the groom's family, something of opposite of this was also happening, and that was called a bride price. It means the groom's family was giving gifts to the bride's family. So in Mesopotamia we see that, and this when the groom's family gives gifts to the bride's family, that was known as bride price. A lot of historians have argued that bride price literally meant that there was buying of the bride. So of course historians have very openly criticized the idea of dowry, because then it means you can bid off your daughter or give off your daughter to the best person. If you can give a very big dowry, your daughter can be married into a very big house, and so on and so forth. A lot of times, even today, you will read in the newspaper where dowry deaths happen, when the in-laws torture mentally and physically the bride, that she should get more gifts from her family, and if she doesn't, she is burnt alive, she's tortured, she's harassed. So a lot of times such practices have existed in the name of tradition and culture, but they're not okay. Now the opposite, in bride price also it's been criticized, because it's believed that whoever can give the highest money or highest gifts or best gifts to the bride's family, the bride will be married there. Once again, a similar idea of the daughter becoming property or possession or something that can be sold. Male heir inherited the property, which means a male child inherited the property. What were the houses like? The houses had narrow streets. There were irregular house plots, so it doesn't look like a very organized sort of a town. Written right here, this indicates absence of town planning. And now let's just have a look at a little more in detail of how the city was not at all planned properly. The drains and clay pipes were found in the inner courtyards, and rainwater was probably channeled into these via sumps. You will find all these meanings like nuclear family, sumps, patriarchy, all of this is mentioned in your textbook also. Kindly read it carefully. A sump is basically an area where sewage and rainwater would flow into, a basin in the ground. Household refuse or household garbage was swept into the streets, and this made the street level rise, so the mud would flow into the houses. Now, very dirty. I'll tell you how this worked. So, go outside your house and see whether the gate of your house, the ground of the flooring of your house, is at the level of the road outside your house. It usually is in level with the road, okay? This is so that, see, because if the road is higher, all the water will come inside your house. But if your house is higher, then whenever it rains, all the water will flood the street. So usually, however, this does happen. A lot of times, roads will be made at a slightly lower height than the house, so that the water can stay there and then seep through it underground, because the water is definitely not going to seep to the ground if it floods your house. But because we have pakka roads today, roads that are made of which are not made of mud, most of the times the level will be flat of your house and of the road. Anyway, but here what was happening in Mesopotamia, Earlier, imagine both the level of the road and the house was the same, all right? But now, where is all the garbage going? All the garbage used to be swept onto the road or the street. Now, when so much of garbage kept being swept onto the street, the level of this, it kept collecting, accumulating, and the level of the street kept rising. So, the level of the street kept rising, which means there is a little slope between the level of the house and level of the street. The level of the street is higher. So now whenever it will rain, all the water and the dirt from the streets will flow where? Into the house. Doorways opened into the courtyard, and this allowed light to come in and gave families their privacy. This is an interesting idea. What is a courtyard? A courtyard is basically square or rectangular open space in the middle of the house around which the rooms are situated. You can imagine it better if you try and imagine the girls section, RKC girls section. There it is like a courtyard because you see an open area in the middle, right? And your classrooms and all these rooms are surrounding it. So that's like a that is a courtyard. That's how houses were made. They did not really have windows, these rooms, but in fact they had big doorways and the light used to come from there. This is for privacy because see, for example, if you have a room on the ground floor and that room has a window on the road, then anyone from the road can look into your house, right? So the Mesopotamians had kind of thought about this. There was also a superstition that if a wooden door opened outwards, the wife would be a torment to her husband. Well, we always see such fascinating, entertaining stories. One of the stories that went in Mesopotamia was that a wooden door should not, if it opened outwards, right? And by open outward, it means it should not open right onto someone else's house. Then the wife would torment her husband. There was a town cemetery. A cemetery is where the dead are buried. A town cemetery had graves of royals and ordinary people both. However, some individuals have been found buried under floors of ordinary houses. How do we know that the cemetery had graves of both royal and ordinary people? Well, because when these graves were unearthed, when they were dug, there were some graves which had a lot of jewelry, a lot of riches, whereas other graves had very modest belongings, very simple pots and pans and cheaper sort of a jewelry. And very interestingly, the people also buried their dead under the floors of their ordinary houses. Why? Because a reason this could have been is because they don't really want to part with the dead, and it's okay because the dead, if they stay in the house, they will then bless them and they could still be close to them. So that's another idea. In the next lesson, we'll have a look at the imperial town of Mari. Thank you.